Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk8271. CryptoPunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we're back with a beautiful punk. She's Punk8271 with 3 attributes: bandana, green eyeshadow, and purple lipstick. In real life, however, he's an ex-merchant marine working on cargo ships, but then securing a pilot's license and currently working as an airline pilot. He's also an avid photographer, the creator of Voyages, and also a well-known collector in this space. Please welcome the one and only Ozark to the show. Ozark, my man,
Yo.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Love what you're building with this. You're actually building an institution here. I love it.
Ah, fantastic. Appreciate the comments and the sentiment. Well, I could probably say the same about you. I've been hearing a lot of good things about you from other punks, and I think you're one of the punks that they wanted to hear the story of. And so I guess here we are. But I'd be interested to sort of understand, to start off, how did you come up with Ozark? Like, what is that?
So Ozark was the persona that I chose to kind of represent me in NFTs and in art. So I fell down kind of the Bitcoin rabbit hole back in 2017. And, that was my sort of introduction to Anon culture, to Twitter culture, and then the subculture of like crypto Twitter, which I think all of us in the space know it's a wild ride. So it kind of was pretty crazy for me. And then when I started to realize that Voyages was going to become an NFT project, I started to look for, names and how to best go about it. And I went all the way back to Arkansas, of all places. So I learned to fly planes in Oklahoma, in a flight school in Tulsa. I'm still, just deeply fond of that town and of the people there. I'm good friends with many of them. And oh, by the way, one of my missions for this podcast is to get you and everyone else listening to get their pilot's license. This is going to happen. Has to happen. So when you get your pilot's license, you'll see that, the FAA or whatever jurisdiction you're doing it under requires you to go through these, steps to earn your license. And one of those is to do long cross-country flights, as they're called, above a certain distance, above a certain time. And what you're doing really is just proving your competence at navigation. And I was looking at the map of, the kind of the Midwest one day, just in one of the briefing rooms at the flight school. And I realized that I hadn't really been out to the east that much. I'd been up, because I'm a huge fan of barbecue. And so obviously most of my trips were down south to like Denton and Armadillo in Texas, getting lots of great barbecue out there. And then I realized I hadn't been up towards Arkansas, and I planned this flight out to just picked an airport, and it happened to be called Ozark. And for those of any listeners from the US will know, like the Ozarks are up there and the beautiful mountain range. This was towards the end of my training. I was, in my mid-20s. I had given up a career at sea, spending all my life savings, a lot of my parents' life savings as well, to become a pilot. And so it was this incredible day. I can still remember it. And flew in to this airport. It was beautiful, surrounded by hills. And it just represented like the high point of that whole experience for me. And so that was kind of the obvious choice for the name. And on Twitter, I'm Ozark Trent. And everyone's like, where did the heck did Trent come from? And Trent, some of the planes that I fly are equipped with Rolls-Royce Trent engines. And so the Trent just came from there.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, it's a beautiful name and a story behind it. I was hoping for a bit more of an exotic answer because I was a big fan of Ozark on Netflix. I'm not sure if you've seen that.
Oh yeah, I get
It's
it all
a
the time. It's like, are you named after the show? I'm like, no, but I can be.
I thought there'd be some secret drug deals and
That's it.
gangster work in the background there, but not meant to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Well, welcome to PunkCast, Ozark, and
Thank you. So
really,
happy to be
yeah,
here.
lovely to have you on. And yeah, so why don't you tell us about yourself? Who is Ozark? What's your background? Where'd you come from? Tell us your story.
Yeah, from India. Grew up in India. My father was in the Air Force, and that life. I'm sure you've heard or know. It involves a lot of moving around. So we moved around the country quite a bit. Yeah, I just kind of grew up playing a lot of sports. Always wanted to be a pilot. But when I graduated from high school, the money required to actually get a pilot's license at that time, we didn't really have it. So decided to go out to sea because my whole family is like they're either just PhDs in biology or doctors, and I just didn't want anything to do with that. So decided to become like the black sheep of the family and kind of just leave that whole academic side behind. And yep, so went out to sea and basically spent the next 9 years in the merchant navy or the merchant marine, as it's sometimes called in the US. I started as an apprentice and worked my way up to second officer, which is you're basically a navigator, amongst other things. Yeah, I mean, the time at sea was absolutely magical. Looking back, at the time, I kind of hated it because my default setting is to just be around people, and I love being around people, and I so kind of missed all of that. And you'd come home from a contract or a tour on the ship, and all your friends would be talking about, I don't know, movies or other things that you had no clue about, and you're like, what are you guys even talking about? So you always felt like a bit of an outsider. I was always on the lookout for what I would do next, and I was just really lucky, to be in the right place at the right time. I This was like mid 2000s. The economy in India started opening up, and the government started like allowing other airlines to operate, and it was just this magical time where basically there were these pilot jobs are sometimes hard to get, and it was a time when there were a lot of jobs going. So yeah, I just made this big decision, took everything I had, asked my dad and mom for more money, and went out to Tulsa to get my license. And that's it really. I flew in India for several carriers for a few years, and then came out here to Dubai to fly for a large international airline, and been sort of flying long haul ever since. Yeah, that's really it for the 36,000 foot view.
No, it's I mean, this is sort of touched on so many different things there. Maybe we just sort of start with, I guess, high school and transitioning into, I guess, the merchant marines. I mean, of all the things that you could have done, I mean, why did you decide to go out to sea and choose the merchant marine life for 9 years?
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, it was the fastest way to get out of having to go to college, and also you were paid a stipend. At the time, it was, believe it or not, it was $400 a month. So basically, your average gas fee for one of your hot mints on. So yeah, so I used to get you would get paid immediately. I thought there was no study involved. Turns out there was a lot of study involved. But the good news is I loved it. I actually became a Met officer, a meteorological officer on board the ship. Got involved with a whole bunch of other projects as well, with uh, this thing called the Nautical Institute. So I did have that academic bent that I guess I get from my family, but I just didn't want to apply it to like the life sciences and just boring stuff like that. It's not boring, I know, but I mean, to me it was at the time anyway.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, like, when you're on one of these tours, like, how long would you be away on the water for? Like, what sort of duration does that look like?
It's wild. The last ship that I ever sailed on, she is called the Burgenland, and she's one of the biggest ships in the world. This is a behemoth, like it's like 60 meters wide, almost 400 meters long. And we would do this incredible trip where you'd go from Brazil all the way to Japan. And the ship's too big to go via the Panama Canal, of course. And you can't go around the Cape Fear. So what you would do is you'd go Cape of Good Hope, but because of how spherical trigonometry works, and because the Earth is round, you have to take something called a Great Circle Track, and that what that does is it takes you round the Cape by like 300 miles. So there's no you don't see land for like 50 days.
Wow.
And as soon as you leave the coast of Brazil, you're out into the South Atlantic and transitioning into the Indian Ocean. And all you would ever see were like whales, dolphins, the occasional albatross, and that's it. And it is just, I mean, I sometimes think about it and I just cannot believe that I was there in that time and in that place. Like, it's just indescribable, the whole thing.
Indescribable in a good way or in a negative way?
No, in a great way. I mean, I miss it so much. It's a monk-like existence. I mean, this was back in sound like one of those old sailors, like back in my day. We didn't have internet on board. I'll sometimes get messages from my batchmates and friends, and they're like, "Yo, what's up?" And I'm like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "South Atlantic." And you could never do that back then. Like, there was no WhatsApp. Or email was just starting to kind of make its way into ships. But yeah, I mean, you really, all you had were books. You had an onboard library. I used to write a lot of letters, obviously, and get letters from other people. You'd reread them like 60 times. If it was a girl, you'd read like that letter, like, once a day. And so, I mean, that whole existence just like it seems so unreal to me now, because I just, you can't have that kind of isolation again now that you have internet everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I met a random person on the plane once, and they said that they used to work in those cruise ships that used to go and
Right.
take people around the world on these cruise ships with their families and stuff like that. But the way that he was describing it sounded really depressing. Like, they would keep you on the ship, you'd eat whatever's left, and they wouldn't see friends and family for a very long time. And then make a little bit of money, but basically they were, they'd probably get 30 days on land for the year or something like that. But they were just mostly away at ship for most of the time. And yeah, that's sort of why I was asking. I mean, it's good to hear that you had a positive experience. Like for me, mentally trying to digest that, I'm thinking, shit, man, like that's a long way, that's a long time to be away, right?
So I might have the numbers off, but the average cruise ship, I think the crew is about 1,000 strong, and then you've got thousands of passengers on the trips when you have passengers on board. Imagine that, but with 24 people. you know, so that's what I mean when I say it was a very monk-like existence. I used to write a lot. I used to, you just have a lot of time to think about
Yeah, no,
things.
it sounds really spiritual. But like, what was the purpose of, I guess, the ship, like just traveling around? Were they on specific exercises? I'm assuming it was a military ship, right?
No, no, sorry, I should have. So this
Uh,
was
uh,
actually just
uh, uh,
cargo ships. Cargo ships.
okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah.
got
So,
it.
so for example, you take a full load of iron ore. It looks like sand, but it's iron ore from,
Yeah.
I don't know, a company like, say, Rio Tinto in São Luís in Brazil, and then you take it to a steel mill in Japan,
Okay, got
and
it.
then you drop it off, and then we used to go to a place called Dampier, which you've never heard of. It's on the northwest corner of your country, of your great country. And this place was just like the back of beyond. The bar was literally cut out of a container. And you'd pick up some more sand from there, iron ore, and take it to a steel mill in Italy. So just stuff like
Wow.
that.
And you'd just be hanging out with a group of guys all the time, getting to
Yeah.
know each other well, playing cards and hanging out.
Yeah, that's really it. Sometimes you'd have so the officers, like the senior officers, the captain and the chief engineer, could bring their family along. But yeah, so for the most part, it was just you and the crew, and it's a funny contrast to flying planes now, where I sometimes fly with first officers who complain about captains, and they're like, "Oh, this guy is a hard ass," and he was writing, he was giving me shit for something, and I'm like, try doing that for 6 months. But yeah, so I mean, you were basically stuck with whoever you got, and you learned to get along. is the main takeaway, really.
Oh, nice. And so talk to me about you going all in to get all your life savings, borrow money from your parents to get a pilot license. What was that experience like? Was that a big critical turning point for you? Was that sort of a stressful thing? Like, what was that sort of journey? And I guess why did you sort of do it? Like, what sort of inspired you to take that route?
Uh, the short answer is, I want to say desperation. I was ready to leave the ship. I was definitely ready to move on. And I knew I was getting to a point. I'd been in it 9 years, and you have to kind of either make a choice and commit, and then go up to captain, or leave. So I started to realize that it was now or never. And I'd always wanted to be a pilot. Growing up around aircraft as I did, and so it was just the most incredible time of my life. I got a phone call from my brother. I was in South Africa in a place called Saldana Bay, and got a call from my brother, by the way, who's also a punk, Tumo, and he
Awesome.
he just said, "Look, there are all these jobs opening up. Have you even thought about like maybe getting your license?" And it's just like a light bulb went off. And next thing spoke to dad and mom. Dad was completely against it. He was like, "What the hell are you doing? You don't even have the money for it." I'm like, "Yeah, about that." um, but it was just incredible. Like my parents were so supportive at the end of it, and they actually sold a piece of land so that I could get the money to go to part of the money to go to flight school, which I you can imagine in India and anywhere else really is a huge deal. Imagine. And so they did that for me.
So how much was like to get your pilot license like?
The whole thing was $46,000. I remember it down to the
Wow.
dollar. Yeah. I was this incredible flight school in Tulsa that ran what they call a guaranteed program. So as long as you didn't screw up too badly, they would just allow you to fly as much as you needed to get your license. And some students took less time, some took more, and then I took kind of an average amount of time for it. And so yeah, it was $46,000, including accommodation.
Was your father being a pilot anything to do with your decision with, wanting to fly planes at all or?
See, now this is it's funny. So my father's actually a doctor. He's a what you would call a flight surgeon or an aviation medicine doctor, or as he likes to call it, Hawaii Dawai, which is a funny way of saying it in Hindi. But so that's his specialization. He's an aviation medicine guy. But from the time I was from early childhood, my brother and I grew up like he would constantly bring us home these World War II comics of these fighter aces coming in from the sun, jumping a squadron of Messerschmitt 109s. And so, I mean, just from the time we were kids, like we were just surrounded by aircraft and aircraft lore, and just it was part of, and it's also because my dad loved it. That's the reason he chose that specialty as well, was because he just loved being. He did a lot of studies, in the Air Force for studying the effects of fighter flying on the human body and all the rest of it. So did a lot of research, and his research was getting to ride along in fighter jets. So imagine like he had a lot more fun than maybe his friends who were doing, I don't know, surgery or something else. So I think it was definitely one of those things where it was like a childhood thing.
Nice. I mean, admittedly growing up, I was, absolutely enamored with, Top Gun when that came out. So I think,
Yeah, yeah.
wanted to be a maverick and, get to flight school and pick up all the chicks, right? Because I don't know, man, like, I think there's just some professions in life where they just feel really glamorous, right? I think, like, being a pilot puts you up there, right? Because 'Cause you're surrounded by hot air stewardesses all day. Like,
Gosh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the glamour of it is definitely, at least on the outside, it's a huge, huge factor. Obviously, once you're in it, the reality hits, and then there's, a lot more to consider. But look, Will, here's how this is going to work. You're going to find a flight school whenever you're in a place that, I don't know about honkers, but I don't know about Hong Kong, but like maybe when you're back in Oz or when you're in the US next, I'm going to require you to please open Google Flight School. This is how it works, right? And you just find a flight school that's close by and hit call. call them, someone will pick up. You say, look, I'm looking for a discovery flight. Okay. They'll, fall over themselves trying to welcome you and trying to make your discovery flight as fun as possible. It used to be about $50 to $75 back in my day, back when I did it. It's lately a friend of mine who I just brainwashed into doing it told me it was $175 now. But again, gas fees on a good mint. So all I'm asking you to do is do this discovery flight. Okay. And in that flight, the flight school and the instructor that you're going up with is going to let you do everything, almost everything. And so you get a really good feel for just flying a 2-seater or a 4-seater plane. So I'm not going to stop until I get you to do this.
No. So, okay, so let me ask you something. You're very convincing, and it makes me want to look up Google right now. But why? Why should I do this?
Great. That's a great question. Wow, you're so good. So, look, it's going to get a bit philosophical, but like we're human, okay, and we're alive today. Okay, what defines the human experience today? To my mind, there's two things. There's the human connection. So it could be a loved one, parents, maybe kids. That's the first thing. That's the first sort of basic sort of proof that you're human is this having a human connection. Okay. The second thing is taking flight. No human until like 100 years ago could even do that, could dream of doing it. Actually, up to maybe even 50 years ago, there was a gigantic swath of like a part of the population that couldn't even dream of getting into an airplane and flying it. And I think most of us listening here and are lucky, privileged, lucky, blessed enough to be able to do this. And so I always say, like, this is part of being human and part of celebrating human life is taking flight. And there's a moment in your flight training. So how it goes is you do your discovery flight, you'll be hooked, I promise. You start flying, you find an instructor you like, you find a flight school you like, it's nearby, and you go up with your instructor and you become good friends with them, and they're showing you the ropes, right, of how to fly an airplane. And what typically happens is you do what's called a circuit pattern. You take off, you turn left again, you come down past the runway, turn left again, and then line up for the runway and land. And you just keep doing that in circuits. And that's how you get your flying and landing practice. One day, it's going to be bright, sunny, calm conditions. You'll be doing your circuits with your instructor, and he or she is going to say, you know something? Stop the plane right here, or just taxi out down to the side. I'm getting off. And you'll know that that's the day you're about to go solo. Okay, your instructor has decided that you're ready. And you're like, you have no time to celebrate, no time to feel nervous, no time for anything. It's pure focus. This is another reason I love flying, is because when the door's closed, it's pure meditation, it's you and the aircraft. And so you're going to close the door, you're going to taxi back out to the runway, and you're going to take off and do 3 landings and takeoffs. That's an FAA requirement. And this act of going solo, like, it's spiritual, it is so powerful, and it's simply you taking the reins of your own life and flying yourself through the goddamn air in an aeroplane. It is life changing. It is indescribable. You have to go through it to believe it. It's not that far out. Like it can, some people do their full private license in a month, and it costs, it used to be like, I don't know, $5,000, $2,000 to $5,000 is probably a little higher now. But all I'm saying is this is happening. This has to happen. And I hope that, whether it's for the spiritual aspect of it or whether it's just for the fun aspect of it, I think I've given you enough reasons.
No, I think it's very compelling. So well done on getting that through. But full credit to you as well, Ozark. It sounds like I can sort of see and hear, I guess, the passion in your voice when you're talking about flying. And I think it's pretty rare for most people to find something that they absolutely love. And I think, and this is something that's quite beautiful as you're sort of talking. You come across as a very strong purist, and maybe that translates into other elements of your life in terms of your artwork and the photos that you take and the way that you sort of collect as well. So appreciate you sharing that with me. But I guess transitioning from your journey from being a few years on a ship, then flying in solitude on a plane. How did you get any time to get into crypto and DJ like the rest of us? Like, what was that sort of journey for you?
I read incessantly. I can't stop reading. It's something that I think comes from my mom. She would read to us every night. And I'm trying to do the same now with my daughter. And it was something that was just, I grew up an absolute bookworm, my brother and I both. And you can't leave me alone for more than 5 minutes, and I'm not reading something. So I came across crypto in 2015 first. In not Mashable, what's the other one? Wired, maybe, I don't know. In one of these publications, there was an article about TechCrunch. That's what it was. And again, I read about it, didn't register, nothing happened. Wish something had happened or clicked, but didn't. 2016 again, I read about Bitcoin again in TechCrunch, and again nothing happened. And again, I wish. But in 2017, this is crazy. I've told it so many times. I was in the bunk of an airliner. So the planes that I fly, they fly ultra long haul, which means you fly like I don't know, Dubai Melbourne or Dubai Houston, stuff like that. And so on those flights, you have 4 pilots. 2 pilots are in the bunk resting. 2 pilots are flying the plane. Autopilot's doing most of the work, but you're there as a systems manager sort of thing. Anyway, I was in the bunk on my rest, and again, I can't go to sleep without reading something. And so I picked up, of all things, a copy of The Economist, like the dirty, dirty Economist. I'm reading this stupid thing, and it's got an article on Bitcoin. And this was mid 2017. And I still remember we were flying back from wherever we were. I think it was in the US somewhere. And we're coming back to, it was SF, Dubai. And I was in that bunk, and just everything finally clicked. All the last 2 times I'd read about it, a few other, little things that I'd heard about it, like all just clicked. And I realized, like, oh, it's one of those things where you sit up bolt upright, and you're like, I have made a terrible mistake, and like for the next, well, effectively, ever since then, I have been more or less full time in crypto. Like full time meaning apart from when I'm trying to fly planes. Like I have just devoted like every single spare moment to crypto and to reading about crypto, and of course degenning along with the best of us. um you know but yeah, that first few months was intense. I mean, they call it the Bitcoin rabbit hole for a reason. It really is. It is like that. I found I was very lucky. Marcus Aurelius thanks all his teachers at the beginning of his book. And I was very lucky as well to have. So that was my introduction to Twitter. I had to get on Twitter to learn more, and immediately it blew my mind that I could follow Adam back. Like, what is that? You can literally follow this person who's living, who's an actual legend, quite possibly Satoshi, if not one of the collaborators. Certainly the only man quoted in the Bitcoin white paper. I followed Nick Szabo, who, by the way, subsequently blocked me, which is a badge of honor. If you know, you know.
Why did he block you?
So Nick Szabo, it's almost a meme. Getting blocked by Nick is like it's a meme now. So Nick Szabo, so he's an absolute OG. Is one of the cypherpunks.
Yeah.
And so I got into it's like that beginner syndrome where like I didn't know any better. And so in 2017, you could get into a thread or a chat or reply to Vitalik or to Nick, and they would engage. So we were talking about the nuances of proof of stake, because at the time that was the big thing, was, oh, we're going to move to proof of stake. And Nick Szabo, obviously, and to an extent me too, to this day, like a little bit, like proof of stake is a perpetual motion machine. Like it's like it's not really defensible, or can stand up to nation state level attacks, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And so there was this thread, and I replied to Vitalik replied to someone else, and then I tagged Nick Szabo, and a guy called Dan Larimer who founded EOS.
Yes,
and and Dan had written extensively on and had spoken on the Epicenter podcast about delegated proof of stake and slashing conditions. And slashing conditions is a fascinating aspect of the whole thing because how do you slash, when do you slash, who do you slash? That becomes a big central sort of aspect of how you gear the incentives in proof of stake, right? And so I tagged this guy, and it's like Nick Szabo immediately blocked me because he's just like, "Don't come at me with this POS stuff." And that was the end of that. And I mean, I think a lot of us back then like carry Szabo blocks. I wish you could just mint it as an NFT. That would be like one of my proudest.
Did you ever cross paths with Craig Wright?
Of course, my God. I mean, you couldn't be around back then with the big blocker thing and the UASF and not heard of that guy. Yeah. I mean, I never crossed paths with him actually, but he was all over, right? Like at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Craig Wright. It was who are the other big figures then? Roger Ver, and who else? Yeah, all of these people.
Yeah, that was. I wasn't sort of super deep into it, but I mean, those Bitcoin maxis still stick around today. Like, I think who was that guy that wrote that book, Safdien Amr. Yeah, so he's still around as well.
See, the Bitcoin maxi thing, like, in order to understand the Bitcoin maxi situation, you have to. So I actually, part of that falling down the rabbit hole was reading the cypherpunks mailing list. I essentially scrolled through the whole thing back then. I had the time. And you get a sense of just how principled, or you could even maybe say paranoid, the original, the cypherpunks were, because they were around at the beginning of the internet, and very quickly they realized that, okay, this is so powerful. Computing is powerful, networked computing even more so, and so they were able to recognize very early on that there would be a fight for that kind of power, and there would be a need for protection from that kind of power grab. And so they realized quite early the need for and the power of encryption. And so when you go through, I mean, Bitcoin maxis get a bad rap. Admittedly,
the dicks. Let's admit it, Ozark. They're dicks, right? Like, I mean, they call they're like shit coins with pictures. That's what they call us, right? So
that's true. But I mean, I have to say, like, being sort of having started as one myself, I do see where they're coming from. Is all I'll say. You realize that they're very concerned with nation state level attacks. Like, is your coin going to stand up to the United States, and all its warships and all the king's horses and all of it? Is your coin going to, be able to do that or not? If it's not, then it's not worth it. Why are you even bothering? So there's, pretty good, plausible decentralization. And
I get all that too, but I think I guess not to get down to the rabbit hole, but like there's varying degrees of decentralization, right? And I think the Bitcoin maxes are like, way on one side and absolutely skewed. Everything else is a shit coin and doesn't listen. But it's a one-trick pony. It's great you've got security, but you've only got security for one asset that can do only one thing, is just be traded and held with each other. But what about the rest of the digital assets? How do you secure that, right? So like, I just came back from a trip from London and just nerded out on some of the history and museums and stuff there. Going through all the medieval times and having a look at all the kings and queens and all that sort of history. And I think I was just sitting there thinking to myself, and I think my fiance really hates it because I relate everything back to crypto, right? Life and everything else.
You too.
And I sort of said to her, like, it's kind of amazing, right? Because in terms of how we've come from history, we're basically, if you think about in the real life, to have property rights, the only way you can enforce property rights is if you actually have a king, a crown, military, a government, or someone like that can actually enforce it for you. Mm-hmm. Or otherwise, it's just going to be, big barbarians walking around going, "I like your shirt, Ozark. take that off." Right? Yeah. Like, what are you going to do? Nobody can protect you, right? And so And so you translate through to digital property and digital assets. It's like there's different degrees of centralization and decentralization and security that are going to protect you from those things. And the beautiful thing is that there's no militaries that can actually do anything about any of this stuff, right? So
Yeah.
so I think and I think that's why fundamentally I keep coming back down to ETH, right? But anyway, that's my sort of view. I'll take on it.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of so Bitcoin development, there's a lot going on. I know it doesn't seem like it on the outside, but I've been subscribed to the mailing list, the dev mailing list since 17, like on the time I started. And you get these mails, and there's a lot going on under the surface. I admit, there's not a lot of excitement or any of the brand new announcements and the merge and the splurge and all that catchy stuff. Like it's
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, but I'm sort of standing back and I'm asking myself, why? I mean, Bitcoin is great for what it does, store of value. It's perfect for that. Yeah, and I know people started to experiment with BTC ordinals and all that type of stuff, and it just feels like it just has a very grifty element to it. And I apologize if anybody's big into that, so I'm not fighting your bags.
I'm not. I gave that thing a big miss. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just I mean, and I get the whole permanence thing, but it's neither here nor there for me, I think. But anyway, so you went through Bitcoin, got absolutely red pilled. When did you buy your first NFT? Like, what was your first NFT?
So the first NFT was a Punk in 2019.
Wow.
And I mean, so by the way, like the first time I heard of Punks was 2017. Literally, so I just spent all this time talking about how I was a Bitcoin maxi, and yet within a month of getting into Bitcoin, I was like, shitcoining at the ICO craze and at the casino, like the best
like
of
all of
us,
us.
like all of us. So, and I'm sure I don't know if so you'd run a full node, an Ethereum node. I would just absolutely brick my Mac and all of it. But then a lot of the ICOs, then you would send BTC to an address, and they would then send you ETH and stuff like that, which is how I got into the whole thing. And I remember, December of 17, the chain was unusable. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And then, oh, it's CryptoKitties. Like, what the heck are CryptoKitties? And so that's how I sort of discovered the whole 721 thing. And then obviously that leads quite quickly to punks. So I knew about punks in 17. I knew about them in 18. And I was still like, oh, we're going to change the world. This is like, I was very sort of idealistic about my approach and my investing as well in the space. And I was like trying to find, all the stuff that was going to change the world. And one of those things was ENS. That was a big thing back then and still is. But I don't remember who it was, but I can swear it was an ENS dev. Lately I've started to think it might be Scott Lewis, who's not an ENS dev, but it was someone that I was following that put on a punk PFP in the middle of 19. And I was just like, okay, guess I'm getting a punk then. And went out to the marketplace and bought the absolute floor. And she was almost the same as the one I have now, which is the Bandana, just a floor punk for like $100 or something like that. And that was it. And I didn't give it a second thought. My alt Twitter account, the one that I've had from 17, like I just changed the PFP to that and just kept it. That was it.
Nice. Oh, so you still have it?
No. So in 2020, when you had that run up, I wrapped her and sold her, and then bought something similar back the next day after panicking. So basically, every mistake that you can make in NFTs, I've made, but with punks. Like everything from not understanding what you're buying, to not appreciating what you're buying, to not buying enough of what you're buying, not having the conviction. And we can get into it later. It used to be hard to talk about. But I also borrowed against 4 punks once and basically blew the stack and lost those punks to NFTX. And yeah, so the 2019 got that one and didn't really think too much about it. And went back to sort of looking into, back then DeFi was starting to take off, and ENS I thought was going to change the world. I still do actually, but I was like focusing on other things and didn't realize what was happening right under my nose. this absolute. Of course, had I joined the Discord, which I didn't know about, I didn't join Discord back then. I didn't even have Discord installed. Had I joined the Punks, Discord, I'd be in a very different position today. With Eric announcing art blogs and all the rest of it. But in 2020, we had like this. So I follow this guy called Not So Fast, which is one of my favorite follows on Twitter, and he started tweeting kind of like, "Oh, this is the last time you ever see punks under 1 ETH. The last time you ever see punks under 2 ETH, or maybe it was USD that he was tweeting." And it was just, I started to realize, it started to slowly, just like with BTC, I had to, it took a while for me to realize, like, oh, holy heck, I've made a terrible mistake. You should go buy more. And by this time, it was like, September, towards the end of 2020, you were looking at floors in the 1, 2, 4 ETH, 5 ETH range. And I bought 4 more punks then. And then when we had that big run up, you heard of NFTX, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The protocol.
Lending protocol.
Yeah, so you could just, I did a test transaction with a hash mask. I had minted 6 hash masks and put one in. You get some kind of hash mask token out that you could then LP on SushiSwap to earn more. You could then farm sushi with it, and I think later they added NFTX farming as well. If you deposited the LP back in NFTX, something like that. But the point is, saw that the system worked, and almost, when we were having that run up to the 20s and 30 ETH range, I basically borrowed against these punks, and I just basically wasn't able to recover the.
Shit. So you lost 4 punks.
Lost 4 punks, and in that run up to in the 20s, I bought another one, and that was the time when I kind of red pilled my brother to buy one. He decided to go a little above floor, got his in the 25 ETH range or something like that.
Who's your brother?
So he goes by Tumo on in the Discord and on Telegram, and he's in the SG Punks group, I think.
Okay.
Telegram, cool. Yeah. Yeah, he's I got him into Squiggles, Punks, recently Winds of Yawanawa. So he's always kind of degened right beside me.
You must have been speaking to DOPP Punk if you're dropping Winds of Yaranara.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I've been Refik pilled by DOPP.
I think all of us is, but it's a beautiful piece, beautiful collection.
Oh, it's wonderful. I'm super excited. Yeah,
got it. So you lost 4 punks, and then you got your current punk. So the 3 Atties, female bandana, green eyeshadow, purple lipstick. Like of all the punks, like you could have chosen, why did you go for this one?
It's the same as all the others. Was just the flow, honestly. So the first punk I got, I had to make a quick decision, and I said, look, we didn't have our daughter at the time. We were trying for a baby, and I always wanted to have a daughter. So I just figured, just kind of silly, but I just said, okay, in the event that we do have a daughter, we need to have a punk ready for her. And so that was really that was really it. It was just like floor price and I remember reading about females are slightly rarer than males. Like there's a slightly lesser population of them. So that was another thing that played into it. But yeah, there was a time when I really wanted to have punks for all my kids and grandkids and all of it. Obviously, that's kind of probably not going to happen at this point. But I did keep all the Meebits from them. So 8 Meebits, never sold, never thought of selling.
What do you think they'll do with Meebits now? They're in a bit of a hard spot, right?
Yeah, they are. But I've, unbothered, moisturized in my lane. I'm hugely bullish on Meebits. I can't, there's that meme of you are not sufficiently bullish. Like, in the long term, I really think they're a no-brainer. They're the first 3D avatars, for the metaverse.
Diamond hands.
From lava, it's yeah.
So you mentioned you collect some art blocks, and I think you mentioned Swiggles. What do you collect? Like, what's your sort of favorite, NFTs to sort of collect? Like, what's in your bag?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so minted my first art blocks in season 2. It was 27-bit digital by Kai, who's also a very famous mebit, and a lot of Gen art. You know, I didn't play art blocks summer as it should have been played. Obviously, like when Fidenza minted, I was out hiking in this place called Storm King up in New Jersey, and just didn't pay. I saw the email come in. I remember thinking, this is beautiful, and then just didn't do anything about it. So I just had fun with it. And I think that's always been all the times when I've tried to do something because I'm chasing it or because I think it's going to moon, I've just always been burnt by it. And so all the times that I've just had fun, it's just turned out by mistake that, I ended up, buying stuff that I love and whether it does well or not. So I think to answer the question, it's really just been about just having fun, and of course, like another thing I love to do is I'm a joiner, so I'll copy trade a lot of like of friends, like as we just saw with DAP and all of that stuff. He hasn't convinced me to buy any icon bags as yet. That's coming soon.
Can't believe we
Yeah.
shared those with you.
Yeah. Actually, to be honest, I did pick up 2 just after. You see what I mean? Like I'm just like beyond help. Like I see someone minting something, and I'll get into it. Like I don't know if you know a guy called Tarun Chitra. Huge fan of Tarun, and he runs Gauntlet, which is like this consultancy type thing, and he puts out the most esoteric, like crazy tweets about like high level mathematics, and he'll be like, yeah, it's just like these crazy tweets. And there was a time when I was just lapping up everything he was putting out, and and he changed his profile picture to a milady, and this was just after they minted, and they were like 0.2 or 0.3, and I'm like, okay, Tarun's got a milady, I gotta get a milady, and that put me down that whole rabbit hole, and it was the whole thing has been fascinating. So yeah, so that's kind of my style, is just having fun, looking at what other people are doing, and just kind of yeah.
Gotcha. What about your project Voyages? Do you want to talk about that a little bit, like what that is and I guess your inspiration behind it?
Yeah. I mean, back when I was like early 30s, I started to really look back at everything, and I started to be like, I guess it was a midlife, I hope quarter life crisis, but midlife crisis. So just trying to just question like what in the heck everything meant. And, I was going through a personal setback in a relationship, and I was really sort of trying to make sense of everything. I realized quite quickly that I'd have to try and express it somehow. And, the only 2 art forms that I'd been practicing on the regular were writing and photography. So started writing a little bit. And so I've been, my parents put a camera in my hands since from the time I was 5 years old, taking pictures. I still have the first reel. It was called a hotshot camera. And it was shot on like 110 film. This is tiny little thing. I still have the photographs from that first reel I shot. And this photograph of me, I took a picture of my brother. My brother's holding a mirror, and in the mirror you can see my reflection. And that was like one of my first photographs. And this was when I was 5. And I've never not had a camera in my hand, and I've always loved taking pictures of people and the places that I've visited. And I found myself slowly, just drifting away from taking pictures of people and portraits and stuff. I used to shoot weddings and events and all of it. I've done quite a lot of stuff in photography that way. And I just started taking pictures of the sky and realized that maybe there was something there, and basically started to do this kind of groundwork for Voyages. It wasn't called Voyages at the time, it was going to be called Sky. That's really it. At the time I thought I was going to have to do the work of trying to find representation with galleries and all of it. This was obviously before NFTs. So the earliest photograph in the collection is from 2015, and the latest one is from 2019. So and it really is, I call it a photographic journal of life in the sky. And it's really just about me trying to translate this experience of being on the road so much from the time I was a child, moving bases And then on the ship, moving, your whole house is moving in a sense. You're living on the ship, and then becoming a pilot, where it's like just this constant displacement, constant movement. And I tried to really make sense of it through this project. And the hope for Voyages is that each of these photographs finds a home with, someone that feels about the world or sees the world the way that I do.
Yeah. They're beautiful, man. Like sort of aerial views. And I think going back to the way that you were describing flying for you, it's very peaceful and serene and calm, right? So no, it's a beautiful collection you have, mate. Yeah, and I sort of noticed you've got some pretty good collectors as well. So I think I sort of see some pretty familiar names: Snowfro, Mullet, Jalil.
I've been incredibly blessed. By the time I don't know how when this is coming out, but by the time this is out, I would have invited the punks to claim. I started by just asking friends and family to choose one to claim, and the next step is to then ask if any punks want would like to claim one, and then kind of open it out to many of the other communities that I'm grateful to be a part of. But yeah, it's just been so the whole thing has been so fascinating to me. Like, because being a degen myself, like, you get with your own project, you're like, okay, how do I figure this out? How do I structure the mint? And because you see all these artists, trying to find new and innovative ways of minting, and it was always an awkward thing for me because I'm not very good with, like, asking people to, hey, come mint this is 0.2 ETH, that kind of stuff. And so I think the dynamic that I've settled on now has been, if I may say so myself, like, it's just been really successful for me personally. Like, so how it works is they're free or you pay as you like. And I got a lot of feedback from some collectors early on. I was like, don't offer them for free. It means you're not valuing your work. And I'm like, how can I not value my work? Like, this is me. Like, this is 10 years of my life. It's literally like hopefully my legacy. But I see what they're saying. But at the same time, like, I started to think about like how I should do it. And I realized that I wanted the main goal was to get these in the hands of fellow voyagers, basically try and find my sort of fellow tribe of travelers and adventurers. And so I realized that I didn't want to sort of put any kind of barriers to entry whatsoever. And it does disorient some people. Like, you'll send them a DM and they're like, hey, I love what you're doing. We've been friends for a while. Would you like to claim our voyages? And they're like, yep, sure. How much is it? And I'm like, well, they're free or you can pay as you like. And they're like, what? No, this sounds scammy. And I'm like, no, I really mean it. It's just you pay whatever you want. And some people have paid 0.0069 and some people have paid, a lot more. And it's been incredible to watch. And also, the other thing I find is, like, people have like very intimate relationship with money, and it's one of, like, I feel like with a human being, there's money, spirituality, sexuality. Like, these are the three sort of core things in a person. And your relationship with money, like, I don't want to get into that. Like, you can choose. You're free to sort of decide.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, right? Because like I think when you're talking about it, I sort of feel like part of the body of work of an NFT collection is also how you drop it on the primary, right? Because that's also a signal of your values. And I think in some ways, it's probably congruent with the way that you're describing your joy, enjoyment, and passion for flying and what you sort of see in Voyages. It's 15 years of work. And you want to sort of share that in a purest way, right? And so I think like the way that you've done it sounds like it's fits nicely into the narrative. It's just like, when you get like, a trad artist coming into this space and they're sort of, you know, haven't been in Web3, haven't done any research on it. They've got a whole bunch of guys working in the background and they're dropping stuff for 2 ETH and, 1,000
Yeah.
editions or whatever it is. And you're just like going, that's a fee grab, right? So it's just inconsistent and incongruent with, I guess, what the artist is trying to say and message. But yeah, so I think the way that you sort of done it sort of makes a lot of sense in many ways.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the funny thing about that is, Voyages, by its very nature is a collaboration. It's a call out. It's me calling out to the world and saying, look, it's lonely on the road. You know, where are you? Let's talk. Let's exchange stories. That's the whole joy of being a traveler, is meeting other travelers and talking to them. And so the art is as much in sort of the pieces themselves as it is in the connection. And that's why I made it invite only, and it's going to remain invite only. Where I either I'm sending an invite to a group of people that I'm fond of, or I'm sending one to you individually, because I want that connection to happen. I want people to, hey, and that's exactly what's happened so far. Has been you know people reaching out and saying, hey, I really like this picture. Where was this taken? And I just want that little bit of dialogue to happen. And so if it's about connection, and if it's about like a collaborative effort, then I'd rather like you choose what you want to pay, because you're almost part of the art yourself by collecting it. So it's worked out super well so far. I'm a bit nervous about the sort of announcing it in the group, but hopefully I people get it. And
Yeah, I think so. I think, well, this podcast adds another layer of context on who you are as a person and what you're trying to accomplish, right? So hopefully that'll add a bit of color for people too. I mean, it definitely has for me, right? So yeah, man, I wish you luck on it, and yeah, looking forward to sort of seeing you drop that. And I guess getting back onto punks a little bit, and a question I typically sort of ask punk casters that come on is, if money wasn't an issue, what would be your dream punk, do you think?
oh my gosh, so the obvious one is the pilot helmet, the Mabu. And I saw I don't know if you saw it, but like there was a sale a couple of months ago. I saw her on the pilot helmet floor, and I was like, oh my god, I wish. Yeah. So the last one went to Nate Alex. He bought one for, it was an incredible buy, because someone listed one for like basically free, as we say. And he absolutely just swooped in and sniped it. And I was like, I mean, I didn't have the ETH by a long shot, but I was just like, I just wish I'd been smarter throughout
Ah,
the last bull market. Do you see it? It's
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
that's
keep
Nate.
getting the pilot helmet and the welding goggles getting mixed up all the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
So this is MB's one. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, so the pilot helmet would be the obvious choice, but and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm sure you're dying to get a pilot helmet," and I'm like, "Yes," but the ones that actually I can't believe exist and they're so incredible are the orange sides. I just cannot, like, I cannot. I think the orange side in the punk collection is just unspeakably incredible. Like, I would
they really
literally,
pop.
yeah, there's just nothing like them, and. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that fills me with regret like looking at those, and I'm like, ah.
Now that you sort of mention it, like I can't think of a punk that has really owned the orange side
No one's done it.
trait.
No one's done it.
Yeah.
There's no notable sort of orange side yet. They're coming. They're just not here yet.
Okay. That might be your next one then. That's cool.
No, there's no chance. I don't have the ETH.
And if you were to look across, I guess the punk community, and I think you're being fairly engaged and involved, like who would be your favorite punk or series of punks? Do you think?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, I've been so lucky to have met and become friends with all these incredible punks over the years. I just met Tony Herrera in Tokyo, and it's kind of, I think it's become like a rite of passage for being a punk now, is meeting Tony. The guy is a legend. He was just so wonderful in real life. It was so kicked to meet him. The first punk I ever met in real life was Dro Scott. We were at this cocktail party thrown by DAP Punk in New York. Like, this was 21 or was it 22? I can't remember. It has to be 21 because 22 was the brunch, right? There was no brunch that time. I remember asking in the Discord, like, is anyone doing anything? And anyway, that was cool meeting Dro and meeting a punk in real life for the first time. Was kind of cool. The first punk that I kind of became good friends with was Mullet, here in Dubai, of course. They spent part of the
Yeah.
year in Dubai, and the man's a legend. You know,
He is.
you've had him on, I know. And Mullet's Mullet, you know, and my wife and I are very fond of them and have dinner with them any chance we get. Speaking of legends, Hamba is based in Dubai, I think, for part of the year. But I mean, there's so many incredible, like Seth Goldstein, you know, is still to call him a friend, and he's such an inspiration as well. I think the team that he's built around Bright Moments is just absolutely incredible. DAP Punk, you know, DAP gave me my start in NFTs.
Really?
On
I didn't know the
the
story.
no, I mean on the minting side. So he put my. I remember as you know, he pivoted area to Light.art, the NFT photography platform, and for their Genesis collection, he put together this incredible curation board led by Claire Silver, and yeah, and I messaged him going, hey, you know, like I apart from being, you know, collector, I also have this thing called Voyages, and he's like, yeah, you know what, send me a few pictures, I'll put them in front of the curation board. And he did that for me, and luckily one of them got selected. So that was the first NFT essentially that I ever minted or, you know, got put out there. So deeply grateful to him.
That punk's all right, depending on what day you get him.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he's okay. Yeah. No, I mean, there's so I mean, I don't know if you know Pops, the guy who created Regulars. Very
Yeah,
fond of
had him
Pops.
on.
Yeah, he's a good friend.
He's
Have
cool.
you had him? I have to actually listen to that one.
Yeah.
The guy's wonderful. Sam, the former CEO of Punks. I don't know if you know Sam. He was doing punk paintings in like 18 and 19. Absolute G. You know, Chuli. I got to meet Chuli now twice in a row with both the brunches, and this time I got to introduce my wife and daughter to her, which you know, with Chuli and yeah, so like the culture of a city or a group of people or a town is set in its meeting places, in its town square, you know, and for us that's the Discord. And so I feel like I don't think we fully appreciate just how much like Julie and the other mods have done for punks in sort of setting that culture over the years. They're there day in and day out doing it for nothing but love, you know. And I really feel like, I know there's been a lot of discussion lately about all of this, but like I really don't know if we fully appreciate just how much they've done for punk culture. And you see it in the Telegram now with Sergito and Isaac, or perhaps Isaac as I call him, you know, doing the same, like just trying to nudge us to be better and, you know, trying to keep things civil. And you know, it's always great meeting these people.
It's hard to be a mod, man. Like it's hard to keep the vibes keeping going on and consistently, right? So I think, yeah, they're unsung heroes for sure, right? So I agree with you.
On the photography side, you know, gotten to meet like Alejandro Cartagena. I don't know if you know him. It's absolute legend. Justin Aversano, of course, got to meet him. Kat Simard and Derek. Just these folks have just done so much for the photography space. Like there's just lights of. There's just incredible people. But for me, to answer your question,
Ozark, I only asked for one name, man. Like you just like
oh my god, how can I not? I mean, no. To answer your question, I mean, to me, it's not even close. It's Eric, you know, Snowfro. Like it's not even close. Like the guy is. I don't think we have fully appreciated just how much he has done and continues to do for our space. You know, all of the things that we take for granted in NFTs, many of those things came straight from him. Like, you know, we talk about charitable giving or things like putting the artist first. Where do you think that came from? It was Eric. And it's only because Eric is Eric. And if you've met him, you'll know, like, just a warm, wonderful human being. And, you know, it's just, there's a lot of like path dependence in these kinds of things, you know, and I don't think we fully appreciate just how lucky we were to have someone like him and his team sort of be there at the beginning. You know, it could just as very easily have gone some other direction completely, you know. And all of the stuff that, you know, like charitable giving and putting the artist first, I'm just talking about, those are like personal traits of Eric as a human. I'm not even talking about like his technical contributions, like the one of X. the generative, the on-chain deterministic generative one of X. Okay. This, and I was saying earlier about you are not sufficiently bullish. Like, I see this innovation as, I feel like it's on the same level as like the telephone. It's just foundational. Never before in the history of humanity have we had a technology where you take a piece of code, an algorithm, you take some randomness, right? And you can, with the click of a button, create a community. Each of the members of that community is unique, just like all of us are, and yet we're one of X. And you can scale this, I mean, from tens to hundreds to how big was friendship bracelets? It was 20, 30, 40,000.
Yeah,
Huge.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I'm saying this kind of stuff is foundational. And of course, Eric, he says it himself, he stands on the shoulders of giants, no question about it. But this basically started with him. And so, I just can't, the guy's, it's incredible
No,
what he's achieved.
I'm with you. I haven't had the opportunity to sit down and have a chat with him, and I do want to get him on PunkCast at some stage, but I want to try and build up as many podcasts as I can. He's always like the last big boss, right? So,
yeah,
to translate.
Yeah.
But I mean, like all the
Yeah.
people that have been around him, like, Pixel Pete, went to college with him, Purple Hat, who I've got coming on soon. These guys that have been working around with him day in, day out in a very volatile, emotional environment. And he's always come out to be a very kind person. And so
He really is
I think
exceptional.
testing times really proves who you are and what your character is, right? And so,
and let's not forget,
with you.
he's had so much stuff flung at him in various discords.
Absolutely.
And I sometimes don't envy him. I'm like, oh my goodness, I just don't know how. I mean, we went through some pretty trying times, and absolutely right. Absolutely right. He's handled it so well.
What does punk culture mean for you? Like, how would you describe that in a few words?
Yeah. I love that you asked this, and I was thinking about it, and I really I think it just comes down to leadership. We've got so many incredible leaders in the space. I think innovators, leaders. Yeah, that's really it to me. Is I think this culture of sort of leadership and sort of blazing trails.
Absolutely. I think that's probably right. I think most of the Web3 sort of leaders that actually have influence and that aren't grifty in that sort of realm tend to be punks in some ways, and I'm not to sort of trying to be biased, right? But I mean, we could waffle on a few names there. And how do you feel about V1 punks?
So, gosh, I mean, look, the V1 token is an important historical and cultural artifact. There's no two ways about it. If you have a V1 token in your wallet, it tells me that you are an absolute OG because you minted punks. And minting punks, there is no other, or claiming punks, I should say. There's no other. I mean, it's just pure signal. There's no noise there. It is the absolute purest signal of being an OG is the fact that you minted a punk, claimed a punk. Okay, so there's just no discussion there. With that said, there's some of this terminology that I see being used around the space that I kind of take exception to. Okay. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about this idea of the V1 and V2 situation. You and I, we don't go out into the world and tell people, hey, I'm V2 number 3434 or whatever. I'm CryptoPunk number 3434. No one we don't call ourselves V2s. So I feel like the V1s need to kind of catch up, and just kind of get with the plan, because to my mind, there's the V1 token and there are CryptoPunks. That's the first thing. The second thing that I sometimes see is this thing of calling Matt and John the founders. Oh, the founders, it's like, oh, the founders this and the founders that. These weren't founders, they're artists. These weren't two guys in Patagonia vests, like, trying to pitch a deck to freaking A16Z, like, oh, this is an app, it's like Tinder, but for pigeons. Like, no, these were artists, okay? They were trying to create art. Matt and John woke up in this cave, this early civilization, called Ethereum, and they just wanted some art on the walls, is all they wanted. So I feel like this thing of calling them founders is a little bit sinister because it implies that punks are like this for-profit startup enterprise. And this is, by the way, comes back to this whole thing of the Yuga acquisition and why it dismayed a lot of us. And you speak to some OGs and you see, it's like, the fact, it's not even how much the IP was sold for or who it was sold to. It's the fact that it was sold, that cements this idea of punks being a financialized asset. And I hold my hand up. I'm guilty of it as well. Like I used to go on about, punks are a call option on culture, and seriously, like I don't even understand options, but there's this whole verbiage around this idea of punks becoming this for-profit, this thing that has moonage built into it, and I feel like it's so damaging. You're calling them the founders, like if say X copy or Beeple or one of these people were to stand up and say, hey everyone, there's this thing I put out on like Beeple, right? Like if he was to come up and say, look, there's this thing I put out on, I don't know, Tumblr. Or I don't know. I don't even know what he was putting stuff out on back when no one cared. But like, say he was to say, look, there's something that came out there, and lately it's come to my notice that there's a group of people that want to hold that up as some version of the work that I don't want to be held up as. And I want all of you as my community to just disregard it. All of us would just line up in the Telegram or wherever and just put a whole string of salute emojis, right? And that would be the end of. Like there's no other discussion of. Somehow, when Matt and John want to express their opinions on what their vision was for the work, we just don't want to listen. They were essentially hounded out of their own Discord, and I feel like the whole sale to Yuga, famously they said, they kept the autoglyphs because that community didn't give them as much shit about lunchboxes or whatever. I'm just joking about the lunchboxes, but I'm just saying, this thing of calling them the founders it just it's not right. They're artists. And then the final thing about this whole thing is this idea that there's people that say there's 20,000 punks. I'm like, where did you get that from? If you're one of these people that think that there are 20,000 punks, we need to talk. Like there's that old saw about like not ascribing to malice what you can sufficiently describe by, let's just call it ignorance. I feel like we need to talk because there are not 20,000 punks. Okay, there's 10,000 of us. And the other thing, the final thing I'll say on this is this whole idea that to my mind, the V1 token does not come with a JPEG. Okay, I know this is probably starting some going down a rabbit hole, but like it points to a JPEG. That JPEG belongs to the CryptoPunk. Like the V1 token on its own is fascinating and important enough, and you can build an incredible community around that simple fact. And as CryptoPunks go up in cultural significance, so too will the V1 token. There's no question about it. It's an important cultural artifact. But this is just a few of the thoughts that I had on this whole thing. And I mean, I guess it'll keep going, but I really feel like if we can try and course correct now and try and fix some of this language that's being used around this whole situation now, rather than it'll be harder to fix later.
Wow, Ozark. First off, I'm going to burn my Patagonia vest as a start.
Oh my god!
But wow, you've really
man.
thought deeply about this, and I really sort of appreciate you sharing, I guess, your views. And look, admittedly, I think when V1 punks sort of came on the scene, I mean, I didn't even know about them until that sort of blew up. But as I'm sort of starting to learn about them, and I sort of share an appreciation them for you for them, but probably share the same sentiments as you. I think there's a level of respect there, but at the end of the day, we call ourselves CryptoPunks. We don't call ourselves V2s, whatever it is. And I think that's where the conversation should start and stop. But I think you mentioned something interesting about Yuga in terms of why you felt that it just didn't feel right. And I think we were talking about congruence with your values. And I think you sort of use the terminology of founders and artists, and Matt and John were artists, and when they basically sold it to Yuga, basically felt like there was a commercial element to it that really didn't feel like it had a lot of congruence with what punks should have been or what we thought they were. And so, like, at that point in time, like, you as a punk holder, like, how did you feel at that time? Like, what was going through your mind?
I'll tell you. You remember Noah gets up on the bar and goes and starts like, okay, who was here in 17? And like one or two hands go up, and like, okay, who was here in 18? And like a few other hands go up. And I'm in the back thinking, do we really need a caste system here? Like, in my heart just sank. I'm like, this is, you know. Now, with that said, Noah, a legend, he's done so well to bring us into museums and all of it. So he's definitely redeemed himself. But I told him this at the second Punk's branch. I was like, man, when you first got up on that bar, my heart just sank. I was like, this is not gonna go well. But yeah, he's worked hard, and all of us send him all love and best wishes for the Baba that's on the way. Or is already born, I think. But yeah,
I can't remember, but
can't
yeah, he
remember. But
said he was
yeah.
leaving, but
Yeah. No, so I mean, that's just the thing is punks have never needed an owner or a leader. And I'm talking both the actual punks from the 1980s and the crypto punks. Like, we've just never needed anyone to tell us, which direction to go or what to do. Punks just are, you know. And so that was and still is my stance. Is just like, the acquisition is kind of a part of the story now, no question. But yeah, that's how I felt at the beginning of it. And there's a great parallel, by the way, in photography. Yeah, so there's this person called Alfred Stieglitz who was around at the very dawn of photography as an artistic medium. And his story is well studied. There's an incredible book on him. It's called An American Seer, and how he defended and promoted photography as an art form. There were all these museums that, like the Met, or the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, where they were like, you know what, we'll put. This was at a time when photography was looked down upon, and it was looked at like, oh, this is a technical thing. It's not painting. It's not art. And Alfred Stieglitz is one of the first people to put their foot down and say, well, actually, no, it is art. And so the way in which he jealously guarded the provenance and the and essentially worked hard to, on behalf of photography, to get it the recognition it deserved. There's a great parallel in the story with NFTs in general and punks in particular. So I have no, I mean, I'm not, like, you are not sufficiently bullish. Like, I'm like,